Have you ever heard of a murder plot so twisted that it involved a federal agent, a secret affair, a fake online identity, and an innocent man lured to his death? Imagine opening your front door because you believe you've been invited to participate in a consensual fantasy encounter, only to walk straight into a deadly trap. Now imagine that same trap ends with a wife murdered inside her own home, a 4-year-old child just steps away from unimaginable violence, and a husband calling 911 claiming he was simply defending his family. At first, police believed they were responding to a violent home invasion in a quiet Virginia neighborhood. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something far more disturbing, a carefully planned double murder driven by lust, deception, and greed. This is the shocking true story of Brendan Banfield, the former IRS agent who threw away his life after orchestrating one of the most bizarre and calculated murder plots in recent American true crime history. Welcome to today's case. Brendan Banfield lived what many people would consider an ordinary and successful life. He worked as a special agent for the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. He was married to Christine Banfield, a pediatric intensive care nurse who dedicated her life to caring for critically ill children. Together, they lived in Herndon, Virginia, and were raising their young daughter. From the outside, they looked like a happy family. But behind closed doors, their marriage was slowly falling apart. In 2022, Brendan began an extramarital affair with the family's live-in Brazilian au pair, Juliana Peres Magalhães. Juliana had been hired to help care for the couple's daughter and lived inside their home. Over time, their relationship became romantic and eventually developed into something much darker. According to prosecutors, Brendan wanted a future with Juliana. However, there was one major obstacle standing in his way: his wife. Divorce would have been expensive. There could have been custody disputes over their daughter, financial consequences, and damage to Brendan's reputation and career. Prosecutors later argued that Brendan wasn't interested in ending his marriage legally. Instead, he wanted a permanent solution. But getting rid of Christine wasn't the only challenge. If Christine died under suspicious circumstances, investigators would immediately focus on Brendan. So prosecutors say he developed a plan that would make it look like she had been attacked during a home invasion. And that is where Joseph Ryan enters this tragic story. Joseph Ryan was a Washington, D.C. resident and computer consultant. He had absolutely no connection to the Banfield family. He was not a criminal. He was not stalking anyone. He wasn't involved in any violent activity. He was simply an innocent man who was deceived by people he had never met. To carry out their plan, Brendan and Juliana allegedly created a fake profile on FetLife, a social networking website used by individuals interested in BDSM and consensual adult role-playing activities. The fake account pretended to be Christine Banfield. Using that false identity, they began communicating with Joseph Ryan online. They invited him to the Banfield home under the belief that he would be participating in a consensual rape fantasy scenario. Investigators later determined that Joseph genuinely believed he had been invited by Christine herself. There was no evidence suggesting that Joseph intended to harm anyone that day. Instead, all evidence pointed toward him being manipulated into walking directly into a deadly trap. Then came February 24, 2023. It began like any other day in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Joseph Ryan arrived at the Banfield residence expecting what he believed was a consensual encounter between adults. What happened next would shock investigators and eventually make national headlines. According to prosecutors, Brendan Banfield shot Joseph Ryan shortly after he entered the home. During the violent events that followed, Christine Banfield was stabbed multiple times and murdered inside her own house. Juliana Peres Magalhães also fired an additional shot that ultimately killed Joseph Ryan. Perhaps one of the most heartbreaking facts about this case is that the Banfield's 4-year-old daughter was inside the home during the murders. Thankfully, she was physically unharmed, but prosecutors argued that exposing a young child to such horrific violence amounted to child endangerment. Immediately after the killings, Brendan and Juliana went into damage control mode. They called 911 and claimed they had acted in self-defense. Their story was simple. Joseph Ryan was supposedly a violent home intruder who had broken into their home and attacked Christine. Brendan claimed he had no choice but to shoot Ryan to protect his family. At first glance, it sounded believable. A husband defending his wife and child from a dangerous intruder is a story many people could easily understand. But investigators quickly began noticing problems with Brendan's version of events. The physical evidence didn't match the story. Digital evidence raised even more questions. And before long, detectives realized this wasn't a tragic case of self-defense. It was something far more sinister. Investigators conducted extensive forensic examinations of the crime scene. Blood spatter analysis, gunshot evidence, victim positioning, and crime scene reconstruction all began painting a completely different picture of what happened inside the Banfield home. Meanwhile, digital investigators uncovered the fake FetLife account. They examined online communications, electronic devices, and digital records that revealed Joseph Ryan had not broken into the home at all. He had been invited there. The so-called home invasion simply never happened. The prosecution argued that Brendan and Juliana carefully planned the murders and attempted to create a believable cover story to avoid suspicion. As investigators continued their work, the entire murder plot slowly unraveled. The affair between Brendan and Juliana became central to the investigation. Prosecutors argued that Brendan's motives were clear. He wanted to continue his relationship with Juliana. He wanted to avoid an expensive divorce. And he wanted to eliminate anyone standing in the way of the future he envisioned. Christine Banfield became the obstacle to his new life. Joseph Ryan became an unfortunate stranger who was manipulated into becoming part of the plan. The case captured national attention because of its shocking details. It had all the elements of a true crime nightmare: an affair, betrayal, online deception, and an innocent victim lured into a murder scene. As investigators gathered more evidence, arrests followed. Juliana Peres Magalhães was eventually arrested in October 2023. Facing overwhelming evidence, she later entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors. She pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and agreed to cooperate with authorities. Her testimony would become one of the most important pieces of evidence presented during Brendan Banfield's trial. Juliana provided investigators with detailed information about the planning of the murders, their romantic relationship, and the efforts made to stage the crime scene afterward. Her testimony offered jurors an inside look at what prosecutors described as a calculated and deliberate murder plot. In February 2026, Juliana was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Meanwhile, Brendan Banfield was formally indicted in September 2024 and prepared to stand trial. The trial received widespread media coverage across the country. Many people struggled to comprehend how a federal law enforcement agent could allegedly orchestrate such an elaborate and cruel scheme. Throughout the trial, prosecutors presented digital evidence, forensic findings, witness testimony, and Juliana's own statements to demonstrate Brendan's guilt. They argued that Joseph Ryan was lured into the home under false pretenses and that Christine's murder was intentional and premeditated. The defense, however, maintained Brendan's innocence. Brendan claimed he acted in self-defense and argued that he was simply protecting his home and family from what he believed to be a dangerous intruder. His attorneys challenged the prosecution's version of events and attempted to cast doubt on whether Brendan intentionally planned the murders. Ultimately, it was up to the jury to determine which version of the story they believed. After hearing the evidence presented during the trial, the Fairfax County jury reached its verdict. On February 2, 2026, Brendan Banfield was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder, use of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and child endangerment, among other related charges. The jury completely rejected his self-defense claims. For the victims' families, the verdict represented an important moment of justice after years of pain and unanswered questions. However, the legal proceedings were not yet over. On June 5, 2026, Brendan returned to court for sentencing. Judge Penny Ascott did not hold back in her assessment of Brendan's actions. She condemned what she described as his calculated and selfish behavior. The judge ultimately sentenced Brendan Banfield to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The sentence means that Brendan is expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars unless his convictions are overturned through the appeals process. Even during sentencing, Brendan maintained his innocence and continued insisting that he had been wrongfully convicted while defending his family. But the court disagreed. Today, Brendan Banfield remains incarcerated. In July 2026, his legal team officially filed a notice of appeal with the Court of Appeals of Virginia. Appeals can take months or even years to resolve, and while his attorneys may challenge various legal rulings from the trial, his convictions currently remain in place. The Brendan Banfield case stands as one of the most shocking murder cases in recent Virginia history. It serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Behind the image of a successful federal agent and devoted family man was a story prosecutors described as one of manipulation, betrayal, and calculated violence. An innocent man lost his life because he trusted what he believed was a consensual online invitation. A devoted nurse and mother was murdered inside her own home. A young child was left to grow up without her parents, and countless lives were forever changed by choices rooted in deception and selfishness. This wasn't a home invasion. According to the evidence presented in court, it was a carefully constructed lie designed to hide an unimaginable crime. And sometimes, the most dangerous secrets are hidden behind the doors of seemingly ordinary homes. What do you think about Brendan Banfield's defense that he acted in self-defense? Do you believe justice was served in this case? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this true crime documentary and want to see more real-life criminal cases explained in detail, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories and share it with others who enjoy true crime content.